Hi seniors, I just wanted to give you a reminder about your final drafts that are due this week. Make sure you go into turnitin.com, look at your feedback. It's really important that you click the feedback button in the right hand corner. That's how you'll be able to see your feedback. Make all the changes, okay? It's really important that you read through all the changes and that you make them in your Google Doc, and when you're done making all those changes, you can submit it to Schoology. I wanted to also go over some of the common mistakes that I saw in the rough drafts, and this is important so that all of you know how to make these corrections, because it wasn't just one person who did it, but it was many of you, and so make sure you understand how to make those changes. Okay, so the first common mistake that I saw was that a lot of you use the word you. In formal writing, we try as much as possible never to talk directly to the reader, so that means that we should always try to not use the word you. It's a very easy fix. Instead of using the pronoun you, you just switch in any other pronoun like people or one or they or students. Go in there and change those pronouns. So you can just change it to a person or a student. So change that you. Here are some examples. So a lot of people, if you use the word you might have used it like this. You might have said something like, you should really care about this topic because it will impact you in the future. This is a more informal way of writing. It sounds more conversational. You're talking to your reader, and informal writing, we don't want to do that. So the correct way to do it is to change those you pronouns for a different pronoun. So you could say instead, people should really care about this topic because it will impact them in the future. So again, it's a little bit more distant, so you're not talking directly to the reader and it feels more formal. Another mistake that a lot of people made were around their citations. So the citations are the things that go inside the parentheses, and the only thing you need inside the citation is the last name. So it should never be first and last name. It should only be last name. If you have multiple authors, then you can put both their last names in there, and then if you have 3 or more, then you only put the first last name and then you put et al at the end to show that there's more than one author. The second thing that's really important is that the period goes at the end of the citation. So it doesn't go at the end of the quote, it goes at the end of the citation. This is really important because if you forget the period at the end of the citation and you start another sentence, it will look like all the sentences are jamming together. And so you need to put the period at the end of the citation. Lastly, you must use quotation marks for any direct words that you take out of the article. If you don't have quotation marks in there, pretty much what you're saying is those words are your own words. But that's not true because those words came from an article. If you don't use quotation marks, that is considered plagiarism because you are using those words as if they're yours and you're not using quotation marks. So it's really important that you use quotation marks around all the words that you get from an article. Here's again another example of a common mistake. So this is a research quote or fact that they found from an article, and it says teens have more motivation when they work with their hands. And then they put a period at the end of the sentence, and then they have a citation that has both the first and last name, Mike Crosby. This is incorrect because the period's in the wrong place, and also you only need the last name. So the correct way to do this would be to say, the article stated that, and then put your quotation marks, teens have more motivation when they are able to work with their hands. Close the quotation, put the last name citation, Crosby, and then you put the period at the end. That's how you correctly format your citations. The second thing here, which is very common, is that if you're using direct quotes from an article, you must lead into those quotes. Okay, you must put something in front of the quote that starts to introduce the quote. The quote should never be a sentence by itself. And so whenever I see a sentence that starts with quotation marks, that already is incorrect. Okay, so you'll see this first mistake example here. It starts with a quotation mark, so it's not leading into the quote. It just starts with a quote, and it says teens have more motivation when they work with their hands. Instead of just dropping the quote like that, you need to add something at the beginning to lead into the quote. So the correct way to do that would be to say, the article stated that, and then put the quote, teens have more motivation when they are able to work with their hands. There's lots of ways that you can lead into a quote. Usually it's by telling us where the quote came from. For example, by saying the article stated, or telling us the author said, or the research shows. All of those examples are telling us where the quote came from, the article, the author, or the research. The other way to lead into quotes is by using transitional phrases like for example. So for example, and then use the quote, teens have more motivation when they're able to work with their hands. Another transition phrase would be additionally, as a result, or this shows, right? These are all phrases that you put at the beginning that will help you lead into your quote. So additionally, teens have more motivation when they're able to work with their hands, or as a result, teens have more motivation when they're able to work with their hands. All of these are simple phrases that you put in front of the quote that leads into the quote better. It's more smooth, and it's actually kind of your own writing, your voice that's introducing us to the quote rather than just the quote by itself. All right, a few more things here is make sure you capitalize each of the major words in your title and your headings. Okay, so the mistake here is a title. So if the title of your paper is about adoption and you titled it The Importance of Adoption, you need to capitalize all the major words. So the correct way would be capitalizing the, which is the beginning, and then importance, because that's a major word, and adoption. So the importance of adoption, importance and adoption should be capitalized. Likewise, you want to make sure that your headings are all capitalized, and some of you deleted your headings out. You actually want to go back in and make sure you include the headings. So the bolded things that said introduction, or the subtopics, right? Number 1, the subtopic needs to be bolded and kept in there. 1.1 research, 1.2 formal research. These headings all still need to be in the paper. Okay, so for example here, this is an example paper that includes the headings still, and so you want to make sure that these things like the introduction, your subtopic 1, 1.1 research, these should still be inside your research paper. So don't delete these out. This is really important because it helps keep your paper organized, but it also helps direct your reader. These little headings, they kind of act like signals or navigation signs that tell the reader what's coming up in your paper. All right, the last thing is that you want to make sure you use transition sentence between your research facts. This helps to create a better flow in your research papers. Many of you in your research paragraph, you're just listing off the facts, and it's fact after fact after fact, and it just sounds like a list, and it doesn't actually sound like a good, cohesive, flowing paragraph. So here's an example of a common mistake, what it looks like. So these you can tell are 4 facts because you can see there's 4 in-text citations here with the parentheses. When I read it, it literally sounds like a list. So here's the example. Teens have more motivation when they work with their hands. Citation. Teens also engage more of their brains with hands-on work. There's a citation. 80% of teens graduate more with hands-on programs. Citation. 25% of schools don't have these programs. Citation. So when I read it, it literally sounds like a robot where I'm just listing fact after fact after fact. This is not how you want your research paragraph to sound. It still needs to be a paragraph with flowing, cohesive writing. The simplest way to fix this is in between each fact, you need to add a transition sentence or a transition phrase. So I've bolded all of them here so you can see them. And as I read it, you can hear it sounds differently. It sounds more like an actual paragraph versus just like a list. So the correct way is it should sound like this. Teens have more motivation when they work with their hands. There's a citation. Then we have a transition phrase. This is because, quote, teens also engage more of their brains with hands-on work. Then we have a transition sentence. As a result, there are more success rates in schools. Transition phrase. For example, quote, 80% of teens graduate more with hands-on programs. And then we have a transition sentence. However, there is still a lot of work to be done. Currently, 25% of schools don't have these programs. So this is actually more like a real paragraph. It has transition phrases that connect the different facts together, and it makes it sound like someone's actually really talking instead of just someone, robotically listing facts. So make sure you fix those if you saw notes about how your paper needs to have these changes.